Hello, everybody. Richard Tromans here from Artificial Lawyer. There's still a few people coming in, but we're going to get started. So good morning and welcome to another Legatics webinar. We did a first one a few months ago about burnout in the legal profession. And today we're doing a new one focused on the future of the legal profession. We're going to be looking at what's happening inside law firms, what's happening in-house, and also we'll consider what's happening in other sectors, such as accountancy. With us is a fantastic panel, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We'll go round from the left side. Isabel, if you'd like to begin.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having me. Isabel Parker. I'm a lawyer by training, trained at Freshfields, where I was their Chief Legal Innovation Officer for a bunch of time. And I remember very vividly Anthony Seale coming into our offices with PowerPoint and a dream many years ago. And look at you now, a fantastic growing legal tech company. It's really wonderful to see. I now work for a not-for-profit called the Digital Legal Exchange, helping corporate legal teams, so on the full customer side, helping corporate legal accelerate their digital transformation together with the enterprise. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Anthony, go for it.
Hi, I'm Anthony. I'm CEO of Legatics. I'm sure you all know that Legatics is a legal transaction management platform, and I have very fond memories of the PowerPoint and the dream that I showed Isabel many, many years ago now.
Fantastic. Shamus?
Sorry, good morning. I'm Shamus Rae, on mute, hopefully. I'm CEO of Engine B, which is a spin out for one of the big four accounting firms. Spent the last 6 or 7 years focused on the digitization using AI and other things of accounting and bits and pieces of law as well.
Fantastic. And just remind me, which big four firm were you with before?
I was in KPMG for
KPMG.
13 years, yeah.
Fantastic. Ben?
Hi, everybody. Great to be here. I'm Ben. I lead the legal technology team at the law firm DLA Piper. I'm based in the UK, but our team is responsible for driving the use of legal technology across all of our international practice groups and locations.
Awesome. Fantastic. And Richard, and then we'll go to Joe. So Richard?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Richard Ashcroft. I am about to become the Dean of the City Law School, currently the Deputy Dean. And I'm really interested in how we get our students ready for professional services industry, specifically law, obviously, but others as well.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Joe.
Morning, everyone. So Joe Cohen, I'm the head of innovation for Dentons UK, Ireland and Middle East. So it's about driving legal technology adoption, doing ideas gathering with the firm, design thinking sessions, innovation training, speaking to clients, creating revenue generating products as well. So yeah, happy to be here.
Fantastic. So it's a huge subject. I mean, the future of the legal profession, the way that technology, innovation, better processes, better use of talent, these are huge subjects. But we're going to try and focus on a few. We're going to look at culture, as mentioned, both as that is both a barrier and a driver for change. We're going to look at some of the initiatives, perhaps, that some of the firms have undertaken. They can tell us a bit more about those. And we're also going to be looking at the accountancy profession briefly. Let's start off with a bit of a baseline to understand where we are. Who would like to have a little go at that? Where are we at the moment? How innovative is the legal market? Are you a sort of glass half empty kind of person that nothing's really happened yet and it's still early days, or have we actually made real leaps and bounds in the last few years? Anyone want to have a starter at that?
Yeah, go on. I'll give that one a go. I, having worked at a few law firms now, so I've done 2 in the Magic Circle, now at Dentons. I actually think that there has been quite a big change from, I suppose I would say legal innovation became a term around 2016. You might have actually thoughts on that, Richard, as to when it kind of reached over the precipice of just being something different. I reckon we've come a long way, but there is still equally quite a long way to go. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a partner in a law firm that couldn't say at least something about innovation, or something they've done or been asked to do. Obviously, you know, everyone, we like to think of it, or certainly I do, as part of a continuum. You know, you've got the champions on one end, and then you've got, you know, the other people kind of on the other end, and it's about trying to move people across the continuum. But, you know, 10 years ago, that was, you know, it was in a completely different place. But yeah, so I think that there's still improvements to be made, but it's definitely come a long way.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, Isabel, I mean, you were working at Freshfields in the innovation, you were co-head of the innovation group, if I remember rightly. And I mean, when did Freshfields create the innovation role?
Goodness, such a long time ago now. I think it was around 2018. So we set up our nearshore services centre, and it was clear that in order to get that to sort of hum more effectively, we had to invest in more legal technology. So that was how that was born. And then it became much more client-facing, sort of digital product type role over time. So yeah, so you know, it was around for quite a long time. What I would say, though, in answer to the sort of broader question, is that though I do agree with Joe that there has been progress within law firms in particular. You see lots of them now with their sort of consulting practices and product development capabilities, innovation teams, and entrepreneurship going on. I don't think there's been a lot of fundamental business model change, which is really what we would like to have seen here. There's lots of incremental change around the edges, but not much has fundamentally changed. And at this pace, if it just continues at this very, very slow and incremental pace, I think it will come back to bite law firms in the end. They need to speed up the degree to which they're responding to what their clients are doing and how their clients' businesses are changing. I can see Shamus nodding his head to that.
Yeah, I do, Isabel. I was going to say I had the fortune, I'm not sure if it's fortune or misfortune, of going on a government trade mission to Canada to look at the legal and accounting industry in Canada and legal tech. And of course, in the North Americas, you've got everything has to be done by law. You don't have a small number of matters reserved, and everything else can be done by anybody. So in theory, it should be a more restricted market. But I was really surprised about how the Canadian firms were adopting technology far more than the UK firms seem to be. So I think even a more restricted market is further ahead. I was concerned, to say the least, but you know, it's an opportunity. Let's keep going on it. It's an opportunity at the moment, but don't be complacent.
We'll talk about sort of burning platforms and drivers shortly, but let's just extend a little bit more on the base layer. So picking up Isabel's point that, you know, we've seen sort of change around the periphery, you might say, but the core business model, the means of production, which is a phrase I like to use, hasn't really changed. Is that fair, Ben? Or
yeah, I think so. I think that's right. I mean, I would agree with Joe that we've definitely come on a long way. I mean, I joined our nascent legal technology team 5 years ago, and we went from a place of having to knock on doors to get people interested in it to a place now where we're kind of having to stop the doors being battered down. That is still a minority of partners within the law firm, though. And I think we're in a place now where we are, and particularly across our service delivery group more generally, which isn't just legal technology, it's legal project management, it's legal delivery center, so using alternative resource. We're at a place where we have got a lot of success stories under our belt and people see the value of it. And now it's a case of trying to scale that. That's not an easy thing to do, but there's definitely a demand there, and it needs to happen so that we can actually make this work across the firm more generally. At the moment, I agree with Isabel, we are just working around the edges.
Gotcha. Actually, let's bring in the next generation, represented by Richard Ashcroft. From what you've heard from students and from the other professors, you know, who are teaching, who probably talk to you about these things, what's the atmosphere among the law students? Are they fascinated by legal tech, or are they just want to go through case law and so forth? I mean, our expectations changing, because ultimately the generation that's coming through now, to some degree, are the ones who are going to really sort of reap the benefits if there is real change.
Yeah. So I think there is an interest in technology of all kinds in our student body, just because of the generation they're in. But I mean, one thing I find fascinating about teaching in law school is that undergraduate students, when they join us, by and large, have no idea about the law, no idea about the practice of law, no idea of the structure of the professions and so on. So they don't really know what to expect. And you've seen some of the controversy over the past couple of years when we had to move to online lectures. Well, we're not getting lectures. Well, why did you ever think lectures were a good idea? There's an inherent conservatism about students, a certain risk aversity, and even more so among staff. We know what a university looks like, and we want it to stay the same. So I look at what's going on in the legal profession with a lot of interest, because there are some similarities. Say we're in the knowledge production and managed business, same as you, but we are much slower to innovate, much slower, which is really paradoxical if you think about universities as places of research and development. I find that fascinating.
And do the law firms, who obviously you're supplying at the end of the day, do they kind of come to you and say, hey, could you create like a legal tech course, or could you teach something about innovation, because the people coming to us don't know anything about it, and wouldn't it be great if you could get them started?
I would love that. I would love that. I think there's a little bit more in the other direction. I mean, I've had conversations with people at Piper's, for instance, in the past that had some contacts, and I would love to have those conversations about people. But I think realistically, one of the issues is about we'd have to do some technology investment. Think hard about what we invest in, what we need to lay on in terms of hardware, software, networking, and so on, in order to be able to emulate the kind of legal tech that's being used in firms. And the other risk, I suppose, is if we're always educating students for the profession of 20 years ago, and we could just repeat that with legal education. We train people in the technology of today rather than making them ready for the technology of tomorrow.
Yeah, it reminds me, like when I like a lifetime ago, when I was at school, the computer science class was taught about punch cards.
Yeah.
And it was like,
yeah,
there's not
we were taught on Commodore PETs, so
no,
my basic skills are still there, just about.
Okay, well, let's. So I think we've established a baseline, which is we've got some positive stuff going on. There's lots of potential, but let's say it's not life-changing yet. Now let's look at how we move forward, and let's look at some of the drivers, because without drivers, this isn't going to change, is it? So, what is actually driving change? Is it coming from within? Other partners having kind of eureka moments and going, yes, I've realized we can change everything, it's going to be great? Is it the clients? Is it coming from the associates upwards? Is it kind of like an osmosis effect, rather like the adoption of mobile phones? Just you start to realize that everyone else has one, and so hey, I better buy one as well, and it just steadily moves forward. So what, I guess the key question for the panel is, what is driving change in the legal sector?
Can I just give a model, Richard, just so maybe in accounting, I would say there was a continuum of change, right? And different changes required at different points. And at one end, there's, I think Joe was talking about this already, but at one end, there's apathy, right? And I think you guys have moved away from apathy. Then there's what we called active inertia, which is a well-known phrase in academia at MIT, talking about technology adoption. So active inertia is you talk a lot, you don't do very much. And then you go into shiny toy syndrome, which is all the partners are rushing around, they need to go and get something, and they're going to grabbing shiny toys. And then the final piece, which is where Isabel was talking about earlier on, which is what's the fundamental business model, and is it strategic? And I think if you look at the change piece, there are different elements of that. At different phases. I think the legal profession is hopefully in shiny toy stage and trying to move out of that, right, into business model change and strategic change, and you need push and pull. You push from the partners wanting to drive change, improve margins, stop burnout, etc. But you'll have pull from the clients as well. So I offer that continuum as a structure for conversation. I don't know if it's helpful or not.
So that's very, very useful, a bit of a framework there, and it reminds me a little bit of the Gartner hype cycle to some degree as well. And I guess at the moment we're in that. Where are we? We're in the, what's the bit now? It's the path towards realization, isn't it? It's that we come off a hype, and now we're passing up through that valley and up again, hopefully. Isabel, I mean, you were in a role. You were talking to partners. I mean, where is the driver coming from?
Well, the driver ought to be economic, but we all know that law firms have done spectacularly well. And pre-pandemic, I was writing this book on digital change in law firms. I thought, well, it's all going to change. Everything's going to change because it's going to be, you know, hard times for law firms. Of course, not that anyone wishes bad luck on law firms, guys, especially those representing them, but nothing did change other than they've made spectacularly huge amounts of money. So the economic driver isn't there. So all the sort of tub thumping I used to do about burning platform just really started to fall on completely deaf ears. So the economic driver isn't there. What really ought to drive the change and take us from shiny new choice to business model change, to use Shamus's model, is clients. And clients are transforming. There won't be a single, and I'm talking about, you know, obviously large corporate law firms here, there won't be a single corporate law firm client that isn't having a digital transformation as an absolutely core part of its strategy. So they are changing, they're changing how they work. Lots of corporate legal teams are now working in an agile way rather than their traditional ways, that they're changing the way they use technology. We're seeing, I don't know if you saw UBS, for example, white labeling their know-how and selling it out and commercializing it as a product to other Swiss banking teams.
Yeah, partner value.
So, so they're really, corporate clients are really, really changing at pace. And if law firms don't relate to them and they don't themselves commit to change, they're going to become more and more disenfranchised from their clients and unable to act as that trusted advisor role. And I think that will be a slow sort of creep, but I think it will happen. And others, we'll get onto the big four, but if you think about the big four legal arms, you know, they've got a very different type of approach to their corporate clients, and they could come in and really mop up unless law firms move quickly. So yes, we thought it'd be an economic driver. It wasn't. It ought to be a client driver. It isn't yet, but I think that's where the change will ultimately come from.
Okay, fantastic. Well, and we'll come back to the economics point, because I mean, it's interesting because all the data keeps saying, you know, GCs are under financial pressure. At which point you then say, well, why are you spending so ridiculously, you know, so much money on completely unstructured, time-based work? Because if you were really under gigantic pressure, you would do something about that. And then you actually look at where the pressure is falling, and it's falling kind of internally, which is why we've had this boom in CLM systems, but we'll come back to that. Anthony, I mean, I think you've been at the front line. You're a tech company founder. You know, why are people coming to you? What's changed?
It is interesting, and we've seen that develop, and it's been sometimes a little bit different to the reasons we thought. But I think there's always a sort of commercial driver behind it. So in the beginning, people came to us and were like, okay, is Legatics more efficient than the current way of doing things? And the ultimate test would be, okay, we're going to run one deal with Legatics, we're going to run one deal without Legatics. We can look at the billing and does it come out faster and by how much? And though sometimes those things offend the scientist in me with sample sizes and differences in deals and things like that, the focus was very much on efficiency. And I think certainly in markets where there's a lot more fixed fee and cap fee billing, that there is an interest in that and there is a commercial drive. But law firms are so profitable sometimes that isn't as much of a driver as the client piece. So if we think about law firms, they spend huge amounts of money on the shiniest meeting rooms. They'll go meet people in person. They'll wear the smartest suits. We live in an online world now, and I think law firms are starting to think, how do we deliver that kind of service in a digital way, and what view does the client get in a digital space of a transaction? So we'll see law firms come to us because a client had mentioned they'd used us on another deal with perhaps another law firm or something like that, and it had a really positive experience. And if there's anything that gets law firms to jump, it's a client saying we had a positive experience with another law firm or something like that, and we had a brilliant view of our transaction on Legatics. So let's do this. But we've also seen a new trend recently, which is in this era of there being lots and lots of legal work and law firms being very profitable, there haven't been enough lawyers to actually deliver that service, and lawyers have been under increasing pressure, and that's I think caused partly spiraling salaries and partly a number of lawyers to resign. So one of the factors that people are now coming to us with is, how can we make the job more interesting, more engaging, give lawyers the best tools they need, because those are the people that we need to deliver the service to clients, and we want them to be happy and have the best tools, maybe even go home slightly earlier.
So it is the kind of osmosis. It's almost like the sort of social change. It's, you know, the benchmark of what's normal is shifting, as you mentioned. It will be becoming more digital, and therefore you're going to have to bring in more digital tools. you know, efficiency may not be about economics, but efficiency may reduce lawyer burnout and so forth. It may enable you to hold on to your talents. Let's go to Ben and Joe, who you both work in large law firms. Let's do Ben and then Joe. So, I mean, when someone comes to you, whether it's an associate or a partner or someone else in the firm, when they start to lay out an idea for you, like, hey, you know, why don't we automate a GDPR tool and everyone can jump onto it? Why are they doing it? Is it because they want kudos from the clients? They're not thinking about the money. They are thinking about the money. What's pushing them to get to your door?
It all depends on the audience, and they'll all be driven by different motivators. Partners will be typically thinking about, how can I impress my clients? And is that a specific client or clients more generally? I agree with Isabel that the most effective driver in this space is making your clients happy. And the most compelling argument that you can make with a client is that if you work in this particular way using this particular tool, you're going to make this client happy, and that's going to make that client more sticky. And that's the most effective thing that you can be saying. With junior lawyers, it's a different story. They're in a position where they have the least say in the way that the work is done, but stand to gain the most from changing the way that the work is done. So as Anthony says, if we're using Legatics, for example, it means that a junior lawyer is not spending hours and hours and hours renumbering documents in a Bible, because they've done it in Legatics more quickly, which means that they're working on better stuff and they're happy and they're developing more. So you've got to tailor the conversation according to the different audience, I think.
Gotcha. Actually, one thing I remember talking to Clifford Chance in New York, and they were basically saying that the partners were just so focused on the client relationship. They didn't really care that much about legal tech, and that it was very much coming from the grassroots, and that an associate would come to a partner, pitch something, and the partner would be like, okay, fair enough. You go off and talk to the innovation people, but I don't want any part of it. I mean, do you get that as well?
Yeah, we do. But that assumes that the junior lawyer has been empowered to make that move. And that's the sweet spot, because if the partners can create a safe space where the junior lawyers in their team feel like they are able to go and have that conversation with the partner because they spot an opportunity, then great, because we want to work with those people, because they're the people that on the ground are going to be implementing this tech, create the change, which the partner then sees may not have their hands in it in terms of actually working in the tech, but they're going to see that the client's happy about it. So I always say to trainees, people first starting out, they're the best people to spot these opportunities to do things differently, but the pressure on them naturally is to conform to the way things are done. And that's a natural thing, irrespective of whatever cultural initiatives are put in place in a law firm, because they think that in order to get on and get by, they need to be seen to fit in. But if you can create a space where actually they are empowered to spot those opportunities and act on them, then all the better.
And Richard, I'll come back to you in a second about the cultural aspect of what's expected of young lawyers, because I see you nodding your head, but we'll just go to Joe and then back to you. So Joe, I mean, same question. So when people come to your door and say, hey, I've got this great idea, why are they standing there? What is it? Are there economic drivers? Is it because they're trying to win kudos from the partners? Is a partner trying to win kudos from the clients? I mean, what's pushing them to?
Yeah, I think a lot of it depends on the seniority. So we do get partners coming to us and saying, you know, can we develop this sometimes, or, you know, got this problem. But I'd say that most of the time that we get demand from partners is us either doing specific deep dives into clients or particular matters, where we're asking them loads of questions about delivery, and then, you know, making some recommendations to them, to which they're pretty much always receptive. I just think that there is a kind of a change barrier of, you know, a lot of partners recognizing the benefits of a lot of the tools that we have. However, you know, having to learn how to use them, explain them to the client, digest the costs, there's just a lot of barriers there, which, you know, as I said before, we're breaking them down, we're getting through to more partners. So I don't think it's the tools themselves that are necessarily at fault, just the you know, long-standing period of not too much change and now trying to do quite a lot once is kind of there, but that's for the partners. But I do want to talk about the junior lawyers as well, because I think that is important. And as Ben was talking about creating a safe space, and, you know, so essentially, and this isn't in the least like plug way possible. So essentially what we've done is create the safe space for the junior lawyers. So they have to, in every seat, the trainees have to do an innovation project. So whether that's automating a document, so like we teach them how to use Contract Express, and they have to identify a document, automate it, and then roll out in the department. Like they never would have done that, right? You know, if it wasn't for them kind of having to do it. So, you know, this kind of mandatory element, does that help encourage innovation? I would argue that it does. You know, increase the quality of some of our AI machine learning tools, do a data visualization project, analyzing document sets in the department, all this stuff. What we see is they'll kind of do it. They'll analyze a whole bunch of leases for break clauses pre and post COVID, and they will, you know, present to the department. That's really interesting. And, you know, they'll go to the next department, and then let's say they've automated a document, the last one, then they'll be asked to generate 100 documents, and they'll say, well, hold on a minute, why haven't we automated this? And they know about that because they're part of a scheme where everyone has to do it, and the partners know that the trainees have to do it. They're okay with them coming for questions. And actually, you know, would they have been empowered to do any of this stuff if it wasn't for, let's say, like a very structured mandatory scheme? I'm not sure. Will it be necessary, you know, in 10 years' time? Maybe not. These guys will be partners. Ideally, then everyone will have kind of been through it, and it will be ingrained in the culture. But to kind of give it a bit of a nudge, that's kind of how we've decided to do that.
Gotcha. I will just go to just one quick question before going to other speakers. You said the scheme. How does that work? Because obviously, if you're a fee earner, you're under billable pressure. Has the law firm allocated non-billable time for these?
Yeah. Well, it's chargeable equivalent time, and it came from the CEO. So he is behind the scheme, sees the benefits. We'll send him at the end of every 6 months a roundup of the best, like to the top 10 innovation. We've got like 80 trainees, so every 6 months, some of them pair up. So end up with like about 50 projects, 50 innovation projects every 6 months. So we'll send in the top 10, and you know, they're normally the most interesting ones. You know, one of the options they can do is work with our robotics developers to automate a process. So, you know, data scraping and populating some, you know, lots of company search forms or whatever it is using companies' house data. And like, you know, and it just gets the senior leadership interested, you know, and gives them insight that they wouldn't have had into things that junior lawyers do that can be automated. Yeah, no, it's been.
If my firm had that, I don't know whether I would have started Legatics. Like that's like music to my ears.
Yeah, I mean, and it's good to see the management getting behind that. So there we go, everybody. Don't be downcast. That's a very nice sort of positive example. It's not briefly. Yeah, Isabel.
But just to come back on that, because I know that Richard wants to come in, but just I think Joe, it's great to hear that, and I think, you know, there's something to be said for this sort of mandatory innovation. I get it. I think it's atypical though. And all the studies shown that, and the Thomson Reuters State of the Legal Market report that came out this year shows there's an inverse correlation between how busy associates are and the amount of innovation they do. There's a chart in that report that shows underpopular activities and popular activities, and a scale as people get busier. As you get busier, the underpopular activities, which should be delegated to the business support staff, are things like innovation, tech implementation, knowledge management, diversity, well-being. And at the top, the popular ones are, you know, client-facing relationship building and strategy, whatever that means. So I do think that, in a sense, law firms have become a victim of their own success. And although Anthony rightly says this technology like Legatics can really ease the burden on busy lawyers, the point is when lawyers are really busy, they just can't focus on it. So there's a problem there that has to be, that's a really big change barrier that has to be addressed. And maybe the mandatory scheme is one way of doing it, making sure that innovation stays front and center, but, you know, not all firms are.
There are, I just would, so it's not the only mandatory kind of thing that we do. And we don't do this for many tools, but there are a couple of tools where we've kind of brought the divisional leads round to say, everybody in the department uses this tool for this, no exceptions, because they see the benefits of it. Now, would everyone have you? Firstly, does everybody use it? No, but we get really good usage rates, you know, much more than you would get from voluntary. And I think it's just a factor of, you know, once someone really senior, you know, oh, I trust that they see that this is beneficial, fine, I'll use it. Whereas actually, if it was down to me, as you say, I'm too busy, I have to learn how to use it. But if the divisional lead says I've got to use it, then I do. And actually, wow, this saved me loads of time. And that's kind of a way that we only do that for a couple of tools because otherwise it's just too much for now.
Thanks. I mean, and that's very interesting. I mean, I think fundamentally what we're saying here is that there has to be, even though there's grassroots pressure coming up, there has to be some top-down management. As my old boss used to call it, air cover. You can't run any strategy without air cover, which basically means the top management effectively saying, look, I'm taking responsibility for this. I support this. Go for it. Let's just go back to Richard, because I just want to ask him about the way that students are prepared to enter the profession, and are they encouraged to have agency to express opinions, to say to partners, hey, look, I know you're, way more wise and whatever than me, but I actually know a little bit more about technology than you, and maybe you should listen. I don't know. Is that, do you feel that coming through, or would you encourage it?
I'm very struck by similarity between this conversation and conversations I used to have when I worked in medical education, before I moved into medical education. Very similar conversations about the transition from medical student to junior doctor, and junior doctors being working in firms in hospital wards, and can you challenge your consultant or not? Can you tell your consultant that he's doing it wrong? Can you challenge your consultant to say, well, here is this new technology, we could do things differently? And some consultants are open to that and some are not. Some will say, you've only been a doctor 5 minutes, you don't know what's involved. I do, and things will be difficult for you if you carry on with that attitude. So how do you encourage people who are learning their profession to be able to say, but why do we do it this way, and could we change things? That is a culture thing that runs. I mean, some organizations are very good at it and some are not.
But would you teach that? Would you kind of teach legal assertiveness?
We worry a lot about employability, so we know we can teach torts pretty well. We know we can teach European law pretty well, for better or worse. And what we are starting to worry about is, do we teach the soft skills about how to come to work, what sort of skills you need when you're in work, can you write a letter and things like that. We haven't yet got into the questions of how do you learn to understand the culture of the organization you're coming into? How do you learn to challenge it? Now, in some areas, our students have got fantastic skills about that. I mean, Isabel mentioned diversity and inclusion. Our students are really good at challenging us on that. I think they'll be really good at challenging employers when they move into work. But when it comes to innovation, when it comes to tech, fundamentals of how a business runs, I don't think they have those skills. So one thing I want to take away from this is think, well, how do we do that? And one way to do that is just make the boundary between the law school and the business school much more porous. In business schools, you are taught this stuff, but in law schools, we've traditionally concentrated on making sure people have got their doctrine right.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you hang out with VC people and young founders, I mean, they want to challenge everything. It's like rebel without a cause. It's like, what are you rebelling against? It's like, what have you got? We're going to change things. Shamus, let's just bring you in here. You were at KPMG for a while. The big four are not a million miles away from some of the larger global corporate law firms. How does it work there? I mean, if a young accountant or consultant wanted to suggest something to a partner, would they get slapped down, or is it would be like, oh, fantastic, I'll take an hour out of my day and let's talk about it?
No, I think, and I'm going to not be rude, but in other words, I'm about to be rude. But it seems to me that actually that the legal profession is at least 5 years behind the accountancy profession, and I apologise for that. But so we had 5 years ago, we had lots of people running around coming up with great ideas, and they were really difficult to harness for all the reasons you're talking about now. Right? And do you want to, you get some partners who would promote and encourage those ideas, some who would keep those ideas themselves and try and implement, some who would hand them over to innovation. And actually, I did a piece where we looked at the total innovation budget each year before we set out a digital transformation budget. And we discovered we were spending 800 million a year on innovation, mostly on side-of-desk projects, right, around the world. And you're going to go, that's uncontrolled spend, not strategically aligned, not against the program going forward. So I think you need to encourage that as part of the whole cultural change. But actually, and you need to have a head of innovation and etc. But at some point, you've got to flip that into a what's the business model which we need to have? How do we strategically bring this together? What's the budget going to be? So we definitely had those problems, right? We definitely had the problems of people doing things and in an uncontrolled way. And some of that you really want to be encouraging because you want it to change the minds of the partners across the world. And I think it's more difficult in a Big Four because, you know, the average Big Four is 200,000 people. You know, the Big Four are 1.1 million people. You know, if you look at the EY law practice, it's 2,500 people. It's nothing, and they've got 230,000 people around the world, right? So it's a drop in the ocean relative to where it's going to be as well, frankly. But so maybe if you're a law firm, you've got 3,000 people, you can manage that kind of bubbling up type innovation. I think that's good to encourage, but at some point you're going to go, actually, we're spending money here. How do we get it to be more strategic?
Well, let's talk about culture, because amazingly we're heading towards the question time already. So and we said we would discuss culture. So let's get into that, and we'll go around. I think, and Isabel, I think particularly has got some views on this. How do we, or how should we, change, if it's even possible, law firm culture and also in-house culture? We need to bring in the clients, because obviously without the clients, there are no law firms. How do we change the culture on both sides of this equation to improve innovation, to drive change? Isabel, I mean, what are the cultural takeaways that people should be thinking about?
I mean, it's such an enormous topic, and I don't want to dominate the conversation, but I would say this, that the kind of culture that a modern and successful organization needs to cultivate to be successful in a digital age is not the kind of culture that traditionally law firms have created. So law firms are strong cultures, and there's lots to be said for a strong culture. It's stable, it offers continuity, it pays well, there's great teamwork, there's lots of great things about law firm cultures. But being a strong culture isn't going to help you to be responsive to a world that is changing at a very, very rapid rate. Everything's volatile, everything's unpredictable. What you need, the change experts say, is an adaptive culture. An adaptive culture is one in which you are sort of atomizing the change effort across every level of the organization. People are enthused about the opportunity that it gives and ready to pivot and respond to changing macroeconomic or client evolutions. Now, whatever you say about a law firm culture, there are not many of them that you would class as adaptive, and I think that's where they need to move to. So that's my sort of provocation for this conversation.
Well, let's go around. I think it's such a big one. Okay, so fundamentally, law firms need to move with the times. We've hit, like you might say, a new era in the professions, and legal needs to shift too. Anthony, I mean, how are you? I mean, you're right again. You're at the cutting edge. You're meeting the firms regularly. What do you think needs to change?
I agree. I think it's culture. You said let's discuss culture now. I think we've been discussing culture in every single thing we've talked about so far. Are juniors allowed to come up with ideas? Are they wrong because they're juniors? Are they encouraged to do so? Do partners want to listen? Can we mandate to a partner that they need to do things? Can somebody make a decision about how a partner is going to run their transactions that you know is sitting in a different team? Are technologists, people who aren't lawyers, respected in the same way as lawyers? Are they trusted to do certain elements of transactions? The theory, the workings, the technology, all these things are there, and I think it's the rate at which culture changes that will enable firms to adapt. And we see it's probably some firms adapting much more quickly than others in that regard. And usually I'd say it's the culture that.
Let's just drill into that. Let's get into some sort of more crunchy stuff. And so who is it? We don't have to name them, but what is making them adapt faster? What are the ingredients? Because I'm sure people listening are thinking, okay, great. So how do I do this? So what are the ingredients for change here? Why are some faster than others?
I think it is that adaptive culture, and even if Isabel says, you know, the law firms as a whole have a long way to move, there are you know, things like Joe's suggested of our partners going to allow the innovation team to mandate how their trainees in their department, as they view it, spend some of their time? And is it really their department? Or is there something bigger there, and are the team above the partners starting to encourage legal technology usage and other initiatives?
Is that like a more corporate mindset where the partners, rather than thinking like, this is my domain and these are my clients and I run it the way I want to run it, they kind of think, well, what's good for the firm as a whole, what's good for the clients as a whole, and having a sort of broader mindset?
But I think that's right, and it is right to say that this needs to happen on both sides, both the law firm and in the in-house team on the client side, because the way I see it is that so often the relationship between law firm and client essentially boils down to client partner and in-house GC. But behind both of those two people, you've got a load of people on the law firm side, junior lawyers, innovation people, legal project managers, everyone in the business service side who have got loads of great ideas and are doing the work. And on the other side, you've got bigger in-house teams who equally have loads of great ideas. They're seeing the way that the work is done, and they're actually spotting opportunities for doing things better. But because those two bigger groups are not meeting and everything is funneled through that single narrow conduit of client partner and GC, you're not getting the benefit of that adaptive culture of putting a great person in this team in touch with a great person in this team and making the change happen.
So yeah, it's what people call HIPPO, which is the highest paid person's opinion, which translates to partner and GC in our context. But yeah, well, amazingly running out of time. Let's just very briefly, because I think we've agreed that what we need is a more adaptive, holistic, and sort of broader mindset to establish change, and that's going to be needed on both sides of the equation, not just for law firms. But just focusing on the in-house, and then we'll go to some questions, and then we'll come to the end will be some of your predictions for the future. On the in-house side, I know some of you may not be experts on the in-house side, but you've obviously engaged with in-house counsel. What can they do? Because we've been really hammering away at the law firms. What can the in-house teams do to change? Joe or Ben, do you want to have a bash at that?
Just hammer your law firm partners. The best conversations I have are the ones that I have direct with the in-house guys, because it's easier to sell to them, because they can see the immediate benefits that they're going to get out of changing ways of working. And then they're having those conversations with the partners on our side. So if I can form an unholy alliance between me and in-house counsel people, all the better.
Yeah. So effectively leave the partners out of it and then sort of redirect it. I mean, Shamus, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I think the in-house guys are going to be the ones who are going to drive change in the whole industry, and I kind of look at them and go, your drivers of change for this industry are two things. Unfortunately, Isabel's right, there's not enough greed and fear around margin, but the general counsel, the tech companies will start selling directly to them and bypassing the law firms. And once they've started tasting that, they'll want to see how the digitization of services goes through the piece. So I think the GCs will start driving change and forcing culture change as well, all the way through.
Can I just?
Joe and then Isabel. Yeah.
So and actually, I just want to relate to something Richard Ashcroft said right at the beginning, which was, isn't it funny how our university is a hotbed of research, development, and innovation, and actually, operationally we struggle to innovate, and that I would say is true for almost all clients that I've spoken to. Pitch to some of the most innovative clients in terms of their product, but actually the in-house legal team will have, won't have a document management system, for example. And actually, how do we expect in-house teams, GCs, to drive innovation in law firms when they haven't, essentially cracked it themselves? So I think that there is, in my opinion, law firms are further ahead at legal innovation than the in-house teams that I've spoken to. In terms of we're certainly not there, but in terms of embracing lots of different types of technology, at least in part, I think that is how I'm seeing the situation at the moment.
Can I just briefly respond? I don't necessarily disagree with Joe. I think are the law firms trying different technologies out, etc. the reality is that the big corporates, right? Take BP for example, right? And they retrained all of their execs at the global level about AI, blockchain, etc., to a level which everybody on this call would be embarrassed, right? So they are driving digitization upstream and downstream with ruthless focus, right? And as are lots of corporates. Now the GC office might be one of the later ones for that to happen, but it's coming, and it's not about whether the GC's got a great whizzy bang innovation person, but they're part of an organization which is digitizing end to end. And so it'll come through the GC office, whether the GC likes it or not. So they're part of a corporate culture. So I don't disagree with you, Joe, but I'm going, some of them are quite advanced, but they're also, all of them in big corporates are going through a digitization journey as part of
I would agree. And I don't disagree either with you, Joe. And I was very much where you were when I was in your role. And then when I left and went full customer side working with corporate legal teams, I have to say the scales utterly fell from my eyes. We used to have a sort of narrative about, law firms need to help the clients understand, that they don't know what they're doing. They absolutely do. Their tech spend is higher than law firms. They're doing it as part of an enterprise transformation. They have a clear purpose. They've got digital skills. 20% of the workforce of corporate legal teams, Gartner says, is going to become multidisciplinary, not just lawyers in the future. They're moving at pace. And I think a lot of law firms just don't recognize that. And I agree with Shamus. I think that's where the change is going to be driven from.
Excellent.
I agree the change is going to come from there 100%. I just, and whilst, we're seeing a lot of improvements, I still think that they're, okay, so let's kind of put it this way. If the in-house team was as advanced, in terms of innovation and digital transformation as, some of the products that their companies are selling, then law firms would be driven to change immediately because of that disparity.
Yeah,
and if it does reach there, if it does get there, then that's where 100% the change is going to come from.
Yeah.
Fair point. I think we agree.
And on that bombshell, we're going to go to a few questions. And there's two people who've asked basically the same question, and it's also one of my favorite subjects, so we've got to do it, which is about the billable hour. And we have kind of covered this a little bit with Joe talking about the scheme that they put together. That was only for trainees, which is only a fraction of the entire firm. How do you drive real change, innovation, when most of the fee earners, all the fee earners really, are so focused on billable hours? How do you overcome that when they're so under pressure? And I actually saw this. I was in Scandinavia once before the lockdown of the pandemic, and I was giving a talk about AI and blah, 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 change and all this kind of stuff. And there was a whole bunch of associates, and I was really pleased, got a great audience. And then a partner came in, tapped on the door, and like everybody just like rabbits in the headlights, terrified. And like literally all the associates just got up and walked out of the room. And I was just left with the rest of the staff. And I thought, what's going on? I said, oh, it was a big deal. Sorry, mate, they've just got to go. I know we paid you to give this talk, but frankly, this is way more important. They've got to do some work. And it's just like whoosh, the room like emptied because they had to work. And I think that's it's like proof, like physical proof that billable hours pretty much trump everything else. But I just wondered what you guys thought. And and I think this is definitely for Ben, Joe, and Isabel, because you've been there. And actually, Isabel, you were a practicing lawyer, but let's go to Isabel. Can we really ever get around that billable hour thing, the way that it holds everything back?
Do you know what, Richard? I'm going to back that back to the people that are working in law firms now, because I feel it's no longer my problem to solve. It's such a tricky question. So with respect, Ben and Joe, it's
yeah. Well, I think the answer to the question, how do you create and develop innovation when you're living in a world where the billable hour is king? The answer is with great difficulty. I absolutely am fully aware that I beg, borrow and steal time from people and lawyers that I know are just naturally interested in technology and will do it as an extracurricular activity in order to build up the success stories, build up the case studies that you can then take back to the rest of the firm and say, this person in the real estate team in Liverpool was really interested in tech and did it this way because he went out of his way to do it. It went really well. Shouldn't we all be doing this? It is tricky. And this is the same story for other areas of innovation as well. It's not just legal technology, it's business development, it's marketing, it's pro bono. All of these types of stuff that, as Isabel said in the Thomson Reuters study, unpopular activities, they're still really valuable and the lawyers want to do it. And the best people to be doing it are usually the ones that are busiest. So you have to create an environment where you are properly recognising and rewarding that non-billable time. And we've all, as law firms, tried different methods of doing it. And I think we've shied away from actually properly, formally recognising and rewarding it. And in order to do it effectively, you need to formally do that.
No, well, that's a good answer. And let's move on. There's a question from someone I've never heard of before called Daniel Porus, I think. I don't know. Anyway, so hi, Dan, wherever you are. Dan asks, isn't the answer actually about getting rid of the equity partnership model, and that because a full distribution model encourages people not to invest, to retain capital in the business? Is there a way out of that? And, can the Big Four shed any light on that? Although, as far as I understand, the Big Four is a partnership model.
Yeah, so Richard, just answering that, one of the things I was going to say later on is if you look at all the Big Four, and we can come to what EY is up to in a second, right? But if you look at the Big Four, culturally, they've been moving more and more of their power centrally, all of them, without exception. And sometimes that's initially centrally within the country, and now it's centrally globally. So the Big Four now have, global heads of chief data officers who are paid $2 million a year, and they've come in from investment banks and big technology companies, et cetera. So they've been centralizing, trying to make the partnership more corporate by having lots of the stuff controlled centrally. But then you look at what EY is doing, and they're going to have a vote on splitting audit and a bidder tax away from the rest of it, which is going to unleash a new corporate, right? And it's going to be a corporate end-to-end, shares distributed, et cetera. I actually think look, partnerships are the worst model to try and drive change in, right? Full stop. I mean, it's much better to be a dictator and control these things end-to-end, but we're not in that world, right? I think what the legal firms could do, and I think this has been alluded to by the people in the legal firms, if you had slightly more corporate culture, then you could drive innovation and have the right budgets and make it more strategic without going to a corporate. I don't think you need to, it'd be great if you could flip to a corporate, but you're not going to do that. So but you need to have a more corporate culture within the partnership.
I think this is the thing. If you look at the law firms who've done IPOs in the UK, there's only one who's really super innovative, and that's DWF, and they do great work. But they were doing great work before they did the IPO, before they became technically a corporate. I've seen law firms that did IPOs that are no more innovative now, other than in terms of financial planning, than they were 20 years ago. But I think the point is corporate culture. And I think you can develop a corporate culture without becoming a corporate. And perhaps that is the key. And perhaps we can do another webinar on that. Let's move on to, actually, I think we're getting towards the end now. Let's do some predictions. And if it's another good question, I'll bring it in. So just starting with Isabel and going round, where are we heading now? What is your future prognosis? Are you feeling optimistic?
I would say, and no surprise to law firms, I would say, look to your clients, don't underestimate them. They are the ones that are going to be driving the change, and they ultimately might be the ones to disaggregate you entirely. That would be my warning and prediction.
Watch out for disaggregation. Watch out for ALSPs.
Well, no, from client side, corporate, from in-house legal teams are the ones that are going to drive the real change. And I don't think law firms have yet recognized that. Gotcha.
Anthony?
I think we've decided that it's kind of all comes down to culture. And I think it's very, very difficult to change culture. But I think one thing that could change it very significantly is changing the incentives. I think some of the things that have created law firm culture are the metrics on which people are rewarded and promoted. And I think, maybe it's more of a hope than a think, there could be a law firm that does something really big, like question the billable hour. And I think doing something like that would drive the most enormous culture change.
Shamus?
So I would have said both of those things as primary things. So what I'm going to say is like secondary to those 2 points. And I'm going to say this, which is if the Big Four starts splitting, then 2,500 people in EY's law department is a drop in the bloody ocean. And you guys are in real trouble because they have chief data officers. They've got knowledge graphs going. They understand AI. And they've got client intimacy, and they've got client intimacy at a digital transformation layer. And so that's good, right? When I started Engine B for cross industry, it was originally called Project Not Kodak in KPMG, because I was trying to say exactly what's on the tin. So I would say there is fear And I know everybody's very dismissive of it, but they've got $10 billion to spend over the next 3 years on digital transformation. They spend up from audit. You guys are going to be in real trouble.
Well, actually, if we have time, I might come back to that point. Joe, how do you see things traveling?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite optimistic. I think that the gains that we're kind of making every year are noticeable. So I don't think we're going to get to the end of the journey, you know, next year or the year after. But I do. No, I think you know, as partner and client appetites increase, as the quality of the different solutions and the variety of them increases, I think that it's only going to improve. I don't see it taking a step back.
Gotcha. Ben?
I think it's recognizing that change will be incremental and recognizing Isabel's point that the best solutions come out of the clients. The most effective change is going to come out of law firms truly work with clients. And by that, I don't mean the classic case of law firms knowing they've got a solution to a client problem that already exists. It means actually sitting down with a blank piece of paper and getting a multidisciplinary team around the room, saying what are your problems and meaning that, and actually delivering a solution around that together.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's hard, isn't it? It's hard because they're coming at you with work 24/7. You know, you may, you know, with all the best will in the world, you may actually want to sit down with the clients and really do that. The phone rings and they're like, hey, we're doing a merger, or we're doing a refinancing, or, you know, we've got to, like, I don't know, whatever it is. You're just, you know, you're in it 24/7, aren't you? It's very, very, very hard. You know, it's the old metaphor about, you know, trying to change a wheel on a car going down a motorway at 100 miles an hour. It's like, when are you ever going to stop long enough to actually do that? But to Richard.
Okay, I like thinking in terms of scenario planning, and that's a long exercise. But one scenario is that universities and firms come into greater partnership, that apprenticeship really grows as the way that we train the lawyers of the future, much more placement in work during one's studies, and that will enable to build in the culture work and the innovation stuff that we've been talking about. And then the universities take a different role here, rather than just sort of being a place which is we train everybody in doctrine. We train different skills, and that will have huge impact on the shape of law schools going forward, as well as the firms.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I've just come back from San Francisco, where we held the Legal Innovators Conference, and there's a law school out there called Hastings, which is right in the center of San Francisco, and they've actually got their own legal tech incubator, which is actually part of the law school, and they bring in new companies, and then they invite the founders to talk about legal tech. And also, I mean, it's an interesting one because for them, San Francisco is full of startups and VC people, so having the incubator has a double value. They learn about legal tech, but the truth is that startups is what most of us lawyers are probably going to be working on anyway.
Yeah.
But London and other parts of the UK are a fantastic place for innovation and founders and VC and so forth. I mean,
we've got Old Street just down the road from us, literally. But am I going down there to talk to people? Not yet. I should be.
Or invite them to come to you. But that's thank you to everybody. It's been a tremendous discussion. I think we've only really just, you know, sort of started the discussion, and I think there's many more discussions to be had. You know, following this. And if you want to have a chat with Anthony about what Legatics can do, you know, drop them a line. Hopefully there'll be some more webinars coming up in the rest of the year. But all I have to say now is thank you very much to our panel. Thank you. And thank you very much for your questions and for attending. And for those of you, obviously this is a pointless thing to say, because if you're not watching this, you're not watching this, but there will be a recording for people who did not attend and have signed up. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.